Hello everyone, welcome to the 179th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. And in this video, I'll resume my crazy scribblings because if I just try to explain this without any visual support, I think it'll be a bit difficult for you to grasp the different ideas that I want to explore here. So keep in mind this is a brainstorm. So I wanted to explore how astrology works because there's so many predictions for 2024 and also, the age of Aquarius and all these kinds of things, and even personal horoscopes and all that, how all of that basically works. And so this is kind of my take on this. Don't take this as the absolute truth, but basically what I've garnered as insight up till now on astrology. So the first basic thing I'd like to talk about is this idea of, the first person that I'd encourage you to check out is Michael Levin and his work. Now, his work is key here because he explores bioelectric fields and the role they play in morphogenesis. So what is that? It's like, imagine you're in the womb, you're to have this tiny little embryo, and what determines how it kind of scales and multiplies to form a fully grown baby, with limbs and all that stuff and legs. And more scientists are finding out that the DNA cannot explain morphogenesis. The DNA, to use Bernardo Kastrup's words, is like a brick building factory. So it tells you how many bricks you should build. It's, quote unquote, like the hardware. But, it cannot account for, how the different parts sort of arrange to form functional organs and the global body. And there are several experiments here that are interesting to leverage, especially in Michael Levin's work, where, while the embryo is forming and organs are there, he takes a little something and just mixes up the different organs so they're not in the rightful place, like the eye is not where it's supposed to be, and all the other parts are not where it's supposed to be. And more or less, they managed to find their rightful place in the body. And so DNA cannot account for that because obviously DNA is like this fixed library that is encoded in this thing. Don't even know why my image disappeared, but who cares? That is fixed. It cannot contain information to solve original or unforeseen problems, such as the fact that you mix up the different organs. And so this bioelectric field is what determines how the cells will fall into place to create this global collective functioning organism. And this is really important. It means that there's a kind of a template, which is bioelectric, which isn't physical per se, it isn't material per se. It's more like an energy field that is surrounding the baby that contains information on how those cells should divide to form a baby. It contains that information in bioelectric form. Now, transpose that kind of logic to planet Earth, all of its continents and little people on it. And now let's assume that the planet itself is also a whole. And it's a natural kind of whole because obviously we can see that it is separated physically from other planets. There isn't a continuity between the planet and the moon, and then the moon and other planets. There's clearly a separation there that is about gravity, about fields, about all kinds of things. In order to be able to bridge that gap and go to the moon, for instance, you have to expand a whole lot of energy. So the Earth is a kind of a natural whole. And like so it makes sense that basically when you talk about ecosystems or the planetary biosphere, you're not considering what's happening in Jupiter when you're talking about, you know, the internal climate of the planet. Now, maybe that's wrong because obviously there are influences from the cosmos on the planet, and that we'll see a little later. But from a purely physical perspective, when you're, you know, digging in your garden or something, you're like, most factors there that you're factoring in are planetary, and you're not considering the whole universe when you're planting, you know, broccoli in your garden. So it's a self-enclosed kind of system to a certain extent. And so it also has its own magnetic field. And also what we call sort of a signature, which is the Schumann resonance. And all living creatures have been bathing in both of these since time immemorial. That's just something that the Earth has that is natural, absolutely natural, like this kind of magnetic field that all of the planet is, we're constantly immersed in it. Now, my take is that the planet's magnetic field and the Schumann resonance contains this kind of high-level information similar to this bioelectric fields in morphogenesis. But this is more like planetary morphogenesis. That is how the planet tries to achieve a kind of end state as a global collective stable and harmonious organism. And is self-correcting, just like if you have in this bioelectric field for morphogenesis. Again, if you stir up the different organs and you sort of, you know, create a puddle out of that, the organs more or less, you know, find their way back to where they're supposed to go. Why is that? Because the bioelectric field is this kind of stable information that is there, that is saying, make an eye here, make a foot here, make a hand over here. And so regardless of the shocks that come, of course, certain shocks may be insurmountable, but even if you try to shock these and mess with it, it will try to attain this end state, which is encoded in the bioelectric field. So it's the concept of attractors in biology. And I'm using that same kind of logic and just transposing it at a higher level to say that the way that humans and human societies are influenced in what we bring to this reality, what we're doing on Earth, and the time of our birth, and why astrology is so powerful, is because astrology is trying to tap into the original blueprint that you come up with, which is similar to this bioelectric field, but which involves other planets and other even star systems. And I'll explain a bit why. So here, let's imagine that this is the entire life of an individual. Like, this is the moment where they die, and this is the moment where they are in gestation, in the womb, and this is the moment where they're born, birth, and they're a tiny little baby, and then this is their life, right? And so these two phases are really, really important. Because, so let's extrapolate. Imagine that you are a cell that needs to incarnate at a certain specific time into the womb. Like, you're a little cell that is going to incarnate into like this baby while it's being formed, while it's developing in the womb. If, depending on when exactly you incarnate in the development of that baby, you will enter into this bioelectric field, that will tell you what you're supposed to do at that specific point in time. If you had incarnated earlier, then bioelectric field would probably have been different, and you would have a different kind of task ahead of you. And so the moment where you sort of incarnate into the womb while the baby is kind of in gestation is very key, because the bioelectric field tells you what your quote unquote destiny, your cellular destiny, is going to be. Are you going to be a skin cell, a liver cell, a heart cell? What role you're going to play? And it's the bioelectric field that tells you that. And the whole point of this whole period of gestation in the womb is what? Is a preparation. For what? For the organism's incarnation, his own incarnation, and what you're trying to do is to create, let's just say the highest potential or conditions for that organism. So basically, imagine if something went wrong in the womb and the baby lost both arms and legs. Now, the range of experiences and possibilities that normally could be available to that organism at birth is much more restricted. Now, obviously, you have examples of people that are born without any limbs that have a tremendous life, and I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying that even if they have an incredible life and they're doing all these different things, the range of experiences that are available to them is still limited, regardless. So this whole preparation phase is just to try to make sure that you achieve the highest potential or neutral kind of state from which here at birth, all possibilities open up to you, or virtually all, with nearly zero kind of, you're kind of starting with a blank slate, so to speak. So you are this perfect kind of organism, and then that offers you so many ranges of possibilities. And so that's what this bioelectric field and course correction is for, is to account for kind of unforeseen shocks or whatever. And then, these different cells appear and they try to correct that while the baby is still developing in the womb in this controlled kind of environment. Now, and also you understand that whatever happens in the womb its effect is multiplied times 100 once the baby is born. So imagine if there's a problem here at birth, or during the gestation, let's say in the 6 months, and the baby develops a kind of a tumor or cancer or something, or whatever kind of problem, or something with the eyes or whatever, maybe it'll cut this experience short and death will happen over here. So, this phase is really, really, really key. Like what happens here is less important than what happens here in terms of the incidence on your life. And so starting with that blank slate, with that perfectly formed full potential is really, really, really important, because it has a reverberation into another dimension, you could say, like this is one dimension in the womb, and this is another dimension outside the womb, right? As an organism and the experiences you're going to have. And so let me now go at the scale of humanity and the planet. And also, maybe I'll just go back to this one just quickly. One thing that is key to understand is that this dimension here, which is your life, this is already kind of 5-dimensional from your soul's perspective. That is, your entire life is like a 5D object. An object that is almost fixed, you could say. You could say it's fixed. And that object represents all the alternate futures and timelines that you could have during your life. And you might think that this means no free will, but that's not the case, because a 5-dimensional object includes so many different alternatives and possibilities for you, the way you live your life, that there's still free will involved. So it's like this open world kind of video game where, you know, the levels are there, there's a certain number of things that can have to be done, and you have absolute total freedom as to in which order you achieve them, whether you go, into wandering off into the wilderness and hunting animals that is pointless or whatever. So all of this you can do. And so, you know, in here, for instance, you can pick any flavor ice cream. You can, pick any kind of car. You can pick, any kind of clothes. And so it's not like this is determined. And so the way to explain this is take a 3-dimensional, cube. So let's see if I can draw that. Oh boy, now I'm in a mess. So you take a 3-dimensional cube. No, very poor drawing this. But imagine this is a 3-dimensional cube. If you project light through that cube, and it's kind of like transparent, it's like a glass cube with these vertices which are visible, and you project a 2-dimensional you make a 2-dimensional projection from 3D to 2D of that cube is fixed. It's not going to change. But how many different shadows that 3-dimensional cube can cast in 2 dimensions that are unique and totally different from each other? And there are so many. You can really create various shapes and things, from that cube in 2 dimensions. And it's that same kind of process where you project a 5-dimensional object into 3-dimensional space. And that creates, the story of your life basically is how you read that 5-dimensional object, or how you rotate it, so to speak, how the perspective you have on it, how you look at it from different angles is what gives you the illusion of time, the illusion of space, the illusion of linear time and space and continuation of your experience in 3 dimensions. But what you're doing is you're just looking at a static pre-existing object that its possibilities, its range of possibilities have been determined at this point right here at birth and calibrated during your gestation. And you're just looking at it from various vantage points. And that to you looks like growing up, looks like having experiences, looks like learning new things, looks like playing sports and whatnot. And a higher kind of consciousness looks at this 5-dimensional object and your life and understands that there are 5-dimensional objectives to be achieved during your life. And that is the kind of the blueprint for your life, which is kind of this bioelectric field. But it's not a bioelectric field. It's more like the disposition of all of, the stars and the planets around Earth and the sun and the moon and all of that. That unique signature and asteroids and all kinds of other things is what sort of sets the bioelectric field or pattern for your entire life and the kind of attractor here. It's like the moment of your death is in mirror to the moment of your birth here with this kind of stars chart. And there's like this highest realization or highest potential for you as a human. Now that you're in this dimension, you're no longer in the womb, that is pulling you towards the moment of your death, which is actually a birth on the other side. So you could say that this is a gestation in preparation for your 3D experience, and the 3D experience is the gestation for your 5D soul experience once you leave the body. So in other words, you're born once, you're born when you die a second time, and here you could say that it's kind of a death here when you're born from going from the womb into the other dimension. So it's just you're transitioning between higher and higher dimensions, and your entire life is a kind of gestation period for your soul, so to speak, or you could say, or for, you know, whatever your consciousness or whatever stays after you shed the body, for yet another life in a higher dimension that you're kind of preparing here. And so this is why it's really important to see now planet Earth as a global collective organism with humans inside of it. And imagine that its 3D experience with humans inside of it is its gestation period. And it has an end state here, which is, you know, a conscious planet that it needs to achieve. And say that this is like the year 2024. And from achieving the state of harmony and the conscious planet, its potential future, the way that, you know, it can sort of live, or the experiences that are available to it in a higher dimension once you transition, are a function of how the gestation goes. Because if, for instance, half of humanity kills itself off via nukes or whatever, or World War III, then it's the same as a baby being born without 2 limbs. And so the potential here is limited again. You're limiting your experience and your potential because you've lost something, or you've created some problems here during gestation. And so say we don't solve the Gaza-Israel conflict at our level as a gestation in the womb. That conflict reverberates into the future as intergalactic wars, for instance. As a kind of fractal kind of pattern that is, because it is not healed at this level, it's going to reverberate and become even bigger and problematic at a higher level, in a higher kind of dimension. And it's the same kind of thing where a tiny problem inside your body as a human, say you have a little, you know, dysfunction or problem at birth, you know, inside your body, that's going to manifest or have an incidence on your experience as a human living in your own kind of dimension and reality. So all of these things are fractals reverberating, you know, through, you know, what I would call this octaves, logic, and resonance. So any disharmony at a certain level creates a fractal kind of resonance at higher levels. And it's like if you take a piano and you have all these keys and you strike one key on the piano, all of the other keys, and you press the pedal, and so all of the other keys that are in higher octaves are going to resonate sympathetically with the key that you played. You're going to enter into spontaneous vibration influenced by that one key that you stroked, that one note. And so that's how any kind of problem kind of reverberates into higher dimensions and also lower dimensions in this fractal kind of way. And so if you solve it at one level, it reverberates across all others. And so what is this realm right here, this 5D kind of thing? Well, imagine, and you have to go back to the previous video that I put, which is Earth is at the center of the universe, is that everything ultimately creates everything else. What I like to say is everything thinks everything else into existence via this retroactive kind of feedback loops. So all of the different star systems that we have, like the 12 constellations. So imagine that these civilizations are actually the result of Earth transitioning into a higher dimension where humans go and actually go to these star systems in, let's say, 2,000, 4,000 years in our linear time perception, which in a multidimensional time frame, you cannot think about them sequentially. But in our kind of experience, that's how it would, seem. And we seed these planets with life, and then we're kind of at the root of their civilizations. Whatever things we have not solved at our level will reverberate into their experience. And so when these, when various channelers channel the Pleiades or channel the Arcturians or whatever, and they are talking about their own galactic wars and conflicts with the reptilians and whatever, these are just fractal projections of the mess that we haven't solved during our gestation period in the womb, and which these consciousnesses are trying to make us solve via a kind of retroactive feedback loop so that it upgrades their experience in their higher dimension. So imagine again, if a higher kind of intelligence saw your entire life, the gestation in the womb plus your life as one continuous thing, and could manipulate things that happen inside the womb because it sees that it will avoid certain problems once you're outside the womb. And it creates these course corrections all the time. And you wouldn't notice it as you're living your life linearly like this. But it's constantly going back into the past, back into the and going, checking what happens in the future, then going back into the womb and saying, let's fix this here. And so that's going to, reverberate here and create that kind of thing. And you're living your life completely oblivious, thinking this is all linear, when in fact somebody is problem solving things for your life in, a higher kind of dimensional space for you to achieve that highest potential for your own soul evolution. And that same logic is happening at our level here. And so the astrology has an impact because what happens is all of these star systems, the different constellations, they send information which isn't really, which is higher dimensional information. So it cannot be really seen in this dimension, but they send information that goes through the portal of the sun. Perhaps it goes through the center of the galaxy first, then through our sun, and then from the sun to the earth, and then the earth updates its own magnetic field in resonance or in response to all of that information that is received from all of these various, places, which basically say, oh, please have this soul incarnate and help solve this little problem, on earth. Like, for instance, you incarnate into Gandhi and make sure that there isn't an Indian-British war that goes on after decolonization because of all this hatred for the colonizer, and you initiate a peace movement, and that reverberates into their dimension, into their own experiences, and solve certain problems or conflicts or disharmonies at their own level. Because in this kind of piano keyboard kind of metaphor, they have dissonances here in higher octaves, which are harder to solve because it's denser information or higher vibrations, which means everything is faster, everything is quicker and problematic to solve. It's like time flows much faster, the complexity is much bigger, and you just see it like as soon as you have a higher kind of frequency vibration, you can fit more info into it, which means it's also more problematic to kind of course correct this or solve any kind of dissonances that happen at higher vibrational frequencies. You understand? So, if you look at your Wi-Fi, if you look at 5G, what is that all about? It's always about increasing the frequency to fit more data or information. But the more information, the more complex to deal with it. But here at Earth level, because we are at lower frequencies and time flows quote unquote slower, then course correcting something here or a disharmony here reverberates into their dimension and solves problems for them. And it's much easier to do it here. It's like I give this metaphor, like what is easier? Correcting a seed before you plant it in the ground and, like a plant sprouts out of it, or trying to correct a plant once it's fully grown and is growing like sideways and is probably you have to prop it up with a stick and physically try to manipulate it. What's easiest? Obviously, it's easiest to correct the information while it's still inside the seed, or as it's barely sprouted, basically. Once it's grown to a certain extent, it's much difficult to correct. And it's that exact same idea. Like things are much easier to correct while humanity is still kind of in gestation, while we're still in this, planetary womb, if you will. Then once we are quote unquote born into a higher dimension, and the same happens here. What is easiest? To correct a deficiency while still inside the womb, or to try to deal with it once the baby is born and try to give him a prosthesis if he's missing a limb or fixing all kinds of... No, it's much easier to do it while still in gestation. And so you have that kind of, when you are born at a certain period of time on Earth, then that is exactly what you have, like a blueprint for the highest potential for your own life that is given to you. And that highest potential not only serves you as an individual as your highest, what you can achieve, but also the highest potential of the entire planet, right? And how that will affect the experiences of all of our quote unquote, I wouldn't say it's not even ancestors, it's not even our future selves, it's something a bit more complex, because at that point, linear time and space doesn't fit anymore, but it affects all of those experiences in those higher dimensions and all these constellations and all of the different planets. So let's see if there's something else that I still want to say. Yeah, and obviously this doesn't mean at the human level that this is destiny. Because it may be like at the level of the cells, because they don't really have a choice, this bioelectric pattern is more like destiny. But humans do have free will. And what that means is that you can swim against these currents. You can swim against this attractor that is trying to pull you towards your highest potential. You can. You have this highest potential and you can willingly steer off course and go somewhere else. The only thing is it's going to be painful. There's going to be pain involved. It's going to be depressing. And you may think, well, oh, that's evil. Why would they give us pain if we choose to do something different? Well, it's like saying you have this piano and you decide that on the piano you're just going to bang the notes, and then you're complaining because the sound is displeasing to your ears. And this attractor, symbolically, it represents the most beautiful music you could play on the piano. And your life is structured in a way that you're going to get clues or that your entire life is basically learning the different elements for playing that beautiful tune at the end of your life, let's say, all right? And so your life is a beautiful symphony, and you get all the tools for playing that beautiful symphony in a non-linear kind of fashion where it's all kind of simultaneous and so you're being trained at different moments in your life via this attractor to play the instrument that you have at your disposal, which is your body, what you do with your life, and to make harmony out of it, to make a beautiful symphony out of it. And your free will translates into the possibility of veering off course and creating dissonant music, but you can't complain then that the experience that you have is pain and depression and it's just like swimming against the current. It's just very tiring. It's just very tiring. And there are reasons for why we have free will, and you have to look at my other videos on that. But basically, if there wasn't unpredictability or a certain degree of non-determinism, which is hard-coded into life, then the universe would just collapse onto itself because it would revert back to perfect symmetry. So just like in one sentence, and obviously you can delve into my other videos and have more information about that specifically. So the universe doesn't lose anything. It builds on what it has. So if there is free will, there's going to be free will is going to be kept, but the whole point is to be able to start playing and enjoying free will, which is exploring this five-dimensional object. This five-dimensional object. Once you understand that your free will is to look at that five-dimensional object via different points of view, and that's all you're doing, you also understand that harmony, a symphony or harmony, you can compose an infinite number of beautiful symphonies once you've mastered the piano. But so long as you haven't mastered the piano and all the keys, then you're going to just play stupidly and badly. And so what is free will really? Like the true free will, it's that you realize, just like on an instrument, like on a piano, you realize that you can play something dissonant, but you choose not to do so. And you realize that your real freedom is to learn harmony to that extent that you can now play whatever you want on the piano and it still sounds good. Whereas while you're still kind of in gestation here, then this is a bit more fixed because you are still a very poor kind of musician and you still have a teacher, which is kind of like this imprint that you receive, in terms of astrology, for saying, well, this is your homework, this is the kind of piano piece, this is the scale that you have to learn this week, and this is, what you have to work on. Because otherwise, you're going to make a mess out of it. You're going to make a mess out of your own free will. And not use it correctly, so to speak. So I'll finish with the highest kind of cosmic perspective, which is really complex here. So you have life at the center. And then you have, let's say, chemistry here. And molecules. And you have planet here. And you have atoms here, or physics. And you have a solar system here. And you have, subparticles here. And you have galaxy here. And you have quarks here. And you have galactic clusters here. Then you have photons. And here you have universe. And you have sound or pure vibration. And you have the multiverse here. And then at the edge of here, you have zero or nothingness and infinity. You start from life. And then as life evolves to become a human, that represents a planet gaining self-awareness and a conscious control over chemistry, because it's a mirror. Molecules and the planet are a mirror of each other. A planet is basically unconscious ball of chemistry in the physical dimension. And with humans and all of the intelligence, all of the IoT devices, AI, all of the things that we learn about the planet is basically will become ultimately a self-aware planet through all of that the planet contains, all the life that the planet contains, including humans. Because humans is like biology reverse engineering itself to the point that becomes self-aware, to the point where this whole can manipulate consciously its own chemistry. What does that solve? Well, manipulating your own chemistry, manipulating your own climate consciously. Just like inside your body, you can create a nice, stable climate, which is 36.5 degrees, and you don't have to worry what the mechanisms are for that. It just happens because you are a whole, you're a functioning organism, you're a functioning whole. And so that happens, and understand that this process, that all of this co-evolves simultaneously. And what does that mean? It means that there may have been other civilizations besides humans before on planet Earth, and they had reached, it's almost as if they had managed to create harmony out of only 3 keys. And it's very easy. If you have like the key of C, the E, and the G, then regardless, you have like a piano with those 3 notes, regardless of what you play, it's going to sound nice. And so what is that? It's like, imagine that the universe is basically falling into the ultimate attractor, which is infinity, which is God or whatever. And if you only have very simple notes to play, then you're doing this. You're just spiraled right into infinity, and it was a very quick experience. And you've had some adventures along the way, you had some evolutions, but it was really, really quick as an experience, right? And understand that everything sort of, co-evolves simultaneously here. So because everything is a fractal and this kind of resonance, whatever happens here, like for instance, you have Atlantis, for instance, and Atlanteans, and they form a global planetary consciousness that is very basic, that has only, say, 1 million humanoid cells in it. Then that reverberates into experiences here as conscious solar systems, conscious galaxies, conscious, galactic clusters, conscious universe, which is, conscious living light or something, and conscious multiverse, and then into infinity. And the range of experiences here is a certain extent, because it's the same with multicellular organisms. Like for instance, if here you have a jellyfish, well, a jellyfish's potential experiences and range of experiences is limited, or a small, bacteria or something is limited compared to a very complex global organism like a human body and a human. A human has a range of experiences available to it much bigger than, say, a mouse or something, or an ant. And so that's your internal state of being. And the complexity of your internal state of being reverberates on the complexity of the internal state of being of an entire planet. So a planet that has a civilization of 10,000 super advanced yogis or whatever, it can shift its inner experience, which is the state of all of the matter that it has, because that's what you're doing. Like for instance, when humans create a civilization here, we are changing the inner state of this planet by the buildings that we build, by all the technology and all that stuff. So we're manipulating the matter, the atoms, all of the it's like this big potential of all of the inner states that the planet could potentially have, which is all of the states that all of the atoms could potentially have, all of the states that all of the quarks could have, and all the photons could have. You're manipulating them, and there's just a certain range of experiences that are available. And so if you now add notes to that piano, and you add all the notes to the piano, now suddenly there is a problem. Well, you have created disharmony, the potential for disharmony, where it didn't exist when you only had these 3 notes. And so this also is where duality comes from. Duality, and maybe even evil and all that stuff, is basically you're playing in disharmony. And so all of this evolves simultaneously. So now from a planet where 10 billion humans like us gain self-awareness, with all of the complexity that we've developed, with the piano that has all of its keys, then the range of experiences that are possible from that are now much, much bigger. And what does that mean? It means that now the experience of falling into infinity, into, the ultimate future, into God, into that kind of, into the center of the black hole, into the ultimate future of the universe. Now what it looks like is this. It isn't this nice kind of little spiraling, which is really quick. It's like this weird kind of motion where you're falling, but sometimes you're falling quicker, sometimes you're not, and this is what free will looks like. This is what diversity of experience looks like. Whereas here, it's almost everything is like there's so much, like there's much more determinism in here, because what can you do as far as music with C, E, and G? Like the kind of music you compose is not much there. And what that means is, again, non-determinate, total determinism is when you fall straight into the black hole and you're instantly, there's no experience, there's no time to experience anything, because you're instantly God. You instantly jump from zero to infinity, and there's no time there, no experience, no nothing. The more complexity you add, the more potential for disharmony, the more notes your piano has, the more complex kind of musics you can play, but the slower you are kind of falling into the ultimate future or attractor. And the more complex it is to sort of fix this and make sure that you're still advancing and trying to achieve your future potential, which is where this mechanism of retrocausality and astrology comes in, because information from the future, from those 12 kind of constellations, then is kind of somewhere here, and it goes over here. And then if you fix this, then you fall in a different kind of way. And I'm drawing this in 2 dimensions. But understand that the spiraling into the ultimate future is in an, like, I don't know how many dimensional space. And so, it's really a much more complex game than what I'm drawing here, but it's just impossible to draw. But you get the idea, right? That the way that you experience your fall into this ultimate potential then reverberates across another dimension, where you're falling in 5 dimensions into this ultimate future in a way that I cannot depict here because it's impossible. And that reverberates into like the 7 dimension, 8, no, whatever. And what's also interesting is if you count this normally, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 with life being at the center. And so 13 minus life, 12 plus 1. This is the 12 notes plus the octave, if you get it. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then C again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the octave. And so you understand that even the way that our physical reality is structured is a reflection of the ultimate nature of our reality, which is vibrations, which is, sound. And if you look at the planets and the dance that they do around the sun, it's a beautiful symphony of harmony and of this fractal perfection and geometric patterns that are exemplary of musical notes and the relationship between notes. And so I think for astrology, I hope you get the picture of why it's so powerful, but at the same time, it doesn't tell you anything, anything definite or surefire. It gives you the original ideal template for what is expected of us. And then depending on where humanity is in its own kind of development. So for instance, if you're here and the template is this, then your path is it can be this, it can be this, it can be this. There's just so many different paths. And so what astrology gives you is the template, so you can have the free will to choose the path of least resistance and that is most enjoyable for you as an individual, but also as a collective and as a planet, to reach that ideal kind of imprint or blueprint for what should happen. And yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else to say. I hope this was clear, and I hope you enjoyed seeing my crazy drawings again. But you understand now that basically from a conscious planet, then you achieve a conscious solar system, which can manipulate its physics, a conscious galaxy, which can manipulate consciously its subparticles, and so on and so on. And of course, this is not as clear because it's more like you're growing roots into these different elements and you're starting to manipulate them more and more, and it isn't like this cutoff where we only have the power over chemistry and can't manipulate atoms. But the more you grow your consciousness in that direction, the more you acquire control over the elementary particles that you are made up of. So in other words, in your external reality, the more your consciousness grows and envelops larger and larger chunks of the universe, the more your inner reality is malleable. And that can, at the human level, it just takes the form of technology, where now we can manipulate atoms and manipulate matter and find all these exceptions to the laws of physics in certain very specific conditions, like in lab controlled conditions. Now the atoms don't behave like, whatever. And that's just the form that this power of reaching a conscious self-aware planet takes from our subjective perspective, and it's just like your body, like you are dancing at the human level, you're moving around, and what kind of explanations do your cells conjure for creating that kind of dance, which is unavailable to unicellular organisms that are in a state of separation? And they can explain it rationally or whatever, or via all kinds of formal explanations. But ultimately, what's happening is it's magic. It's from their perspective, it's magic. From this perspective, it's just the power of a conscious planet that reaches to the point that it can start consciously manipulating its inner states of being in ways that are bordering on the magical, from our vantage point as humans inside that kind of organism. And so also about disclosure and all that stuff, obviously the moment that you achieve birth as a global conscious planet, then you start interacting with other conscious planets. And that's the whole, that's when you are in 5D, and that's when you start interacting with other alien civilizations. And that's why it's so important that your gestation, while you're still inside the womb, happens in a certain number of ways, because then your interactions with those aliens could go completely berserk and go off the rails, and that's going to reverberate into all kinds of dimensions and create all kinds of problems. Hence why there's astrology. Hence why there's all these information is sent to us from these higher dimensions through the sun via solar flares and all that stuff. Because again, understand that all of that higher dimensional information is being sent to Earth, and it can take the form of solar flares. It can take the form of all kinds of other things. So the sun isn't a dumb kind of unconscious, entity. It is at the same time, the sun is right here an unconscious ball of physics, and at the same time, in a higher dimensional plane, it is something that is above us in terms of consciousness, because a conscious solar system is like the Earth would be like the stomach or the liver inside the global organism of the solar system. So it's like a nested kind of logic, where it is a higher dimensional intelligence that sends us these things like solar flares or whatever, that are then translated through the Earth's own magnetic field into events that are three-dimensional, like for instance, an earthquake or whatever, and that's what the Schumann resonance and that's what the Earth's magnetic field is for. It's just like the barrier of the skin in a mother's womb that is the barrier between higher dimensional, information from the outside. Like for instance, I don't know, you have like the wife has a fight with his husband, and the baby is still in the womb in gestation. It doesn't understand what's going on. It doesn't understand the content of the fight. Like for instance, imagine like the husband here is shouting some information at the mother, and that information gets translated through the barrier of the womb into lower dimensional information that affects the cells of the baby, and then that affects what happens once the baby is born, in terms of like, oh, this is the problem that I have to solve in this higher dimension because my father and mother are in conflict, and therefore my mission is to be born and to make sure that they reconcile, and they and you're kind of, that's like your karma is right there. It's like this is happening in a higher dimension, and you're trying to offset that and solve that. And so while you're in gestation, you get that information that is encoded in you in a lower kind of dimension, and then when you're born, then you try to fix it in that higher dimension. And so imagine if, say, we are on Earth here, and in a higher dimension you have Pleiades and Arcturians that are fighting, and then that information sort of goes through the sun and then reaches Earth, and then so humans are kind of programmed via that kind of higher information that this is a problem that needs to be solved, and what's going to happen. Okay, so maybe we're going to have a war between Israel and Palestine, and if we fix that at our level, then we'll be able to fix it at that level because of this sympathetic resonance phenomenon. So yeah, I hope all of this is clear. I mean, I understand that it's a lot to take in, and yeah, so I mean, indeed, if you listen to many people, they say that the last time we were in this period, we had the French Revolution, the American Revolution. These are just the forms that a higher dimensional kind of event takes when it's translated into human form. Just like when you receive a punch from somebody on the outside, what your cells experience is a huge biological and biochemical cocktail. They don't understand that you've received, that you've been punched. So your skin is like a barrier between two dimensions, an internal dimension where all external events are converted into a biochemical reality, and the Earth's magnetic field is like the skin of this planet where multidimensional events are converted into a three-dimensional linear time frame and format for us humans. And then we experience it the way that we experience it. I mean, you receive a punch, and there's just so many ways that it can be healed. There's so many ways that it can be interpreted by the inner parts of your body. Obviously, here your cells don't have that capability, but us humans, we do have that capability. So we have the ability to give a form to something that is multidimensional, that is not necessarily, that is formless. So for instance, imagine if on the Earth everybody was believing still in monotheism. Then instead of having intergalactic wars, we could see in the sky, Satan firing bolts at angels and having a kind of a divine fight there, because you're giving a subjective human form to something that is formless, to a disharmony between different parts of reality in a higher dimension, in a form that you can understand from your belief system and the way that you perceive reality, right? So because most humans now are in this paradigm of materialist science, that's the kind of paradigm or lens that we experience, that we use to color or give a form to all of these different higher dimensional events that hit Earth, from these higher dimensional planes, and that stir us in a certain experience. So yeah, and don't hesitate to comment. Please like, share, subscribe if you found this interesting, and talk to you in the next video. Bye guys.